All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode where we're going to talk about relationship OCD. Now, relationship OCD, again, is a subcategory of OCD in the intrusive thoughts realm, or kind of that what you might call a puro OCD, right? And so, like I said, in this series, what we're doing is we're moving into kind of the last section. So we started with the religious obsessions and then the harmful obsessions. And then now we're moving into the love slash kind of sexual obsessions. And I'm going to start with relationship OCD today as the first one. So let's start with just what is relationship OCD. Now, relationship OCD is when OCD basically kind of latches on to the idea of love, or am I in the right relationship? And what a person will do with relationship OCD is they'll analyze and just repetitively again and again and kind of analyze their partner as if to find out as if the partner is the right one, right? Are they the perfect match for them, right? And so that will be, a lot of the compulsions will be very mental based, where it's a lot of analyzing, a lot of ruminating, a lot of rationalizing, a lot of nitpicking the negative qualities of their partner to trying to justify if they are in the right relationship or not. Okay. And so again, and so there's a few points that I want to cover in today's episode when we're talking about if this is something you struggle with, or if this is, if you're a clinician and you're working with someone with this, kind of just some points to really consider when we are working with someone, or, if you struggle with this. So point number one is the obvious, that relationships are complicated, right? They're a very complex thing on any level, and especially when you start bringing in mental health struggles into them. I mean, they become more complex, right? And this idea that I think one of the best things that you can do with relationship OCD is, from the book The Road Less Traveled with Dr. M. Scott Peck. I mean, he really takes the word love, and as opposed to making it a feeling, he says to make it a choice, right? This idea of like you're choosing to love someone. And that's an important thing in the relationship OCD, because there's so much anxiety and feelings that are enmeshed in this whole thing with someone who struggles with this. So they're constantly just like, oh my gosh, my partner is balding, or I don't like their teeth, or they're not that funny, so are they the perfect person, right? And then their anxiety will spike, and then they'll start to analyze their own attraction to them, right? So point number two is that right there. So the first point is that just relationships are complicated. But point number two is really this idea of to remove the idea of justifying the relationship with your feelings. Because what happens is people will start to analyze the relationship, and what they'll do is they'll start to analyze if they feel love for the person, right? And that's a tricky thing, because anyone that's been in a relationship for any length of time will tell you that, look, feelings ebb and flow. Sometimes you're upset, sometimes you've had a bad day, sometimes your partner is getting on your nerves. I mean, that's just part of relationships, right? There is no person who you're just going to be in this ooey gooey lovey-dovey state all day 24/7, especially if the relationship has been going for a little while, right? I mean, usually in the first few months it might be like that, but relationships grow and evolve over time, and so do the individuals in the relationship, right? And so when you are trying to justify your feelings as if you should stay in the relationship or not, what happens is you try to create those feelings, or by scanning for those feelings, you actually don't create them. So for instance, the idea of sexual arousal or physical arousal, if you're trying to see if you're experiencing that and analyze if you're aroused by the person, oftentimes that will actually block a state of arousal, right? Or actually have a reverse effect, right? It's trying to like make yourself aroused, so to speak. And it doesn't work, right? Which then again reinforces the idea that, oh, this is a bad relationship, you see, because I'm not aroused by this person, or this and that, right? And then and then the third point that I want to talk about is this idea of the right one. And or this idea of the perfect person. I've heard people say this idea of like a dual flame, and it's this idea that there's one person in this world that you're meant to be with, and if you're not with them, that relationship can't work, so you need to keep looking. And it's interesting because, in studies in marriage, obviously in the United States, there's such a high divorce rate, and it's so interesting when you look at like marital satisfaction, that people in arranged marriages are sometimes even happier than people with, that have the opportunity to just kind of choose their partners. And really, it comes back down to this idea of this paradox of choice, right? Like the grass is always greener, and, always second guessing your decision because you have unlimited choices, that there never really can be the right one because you'll always find something wrong. And they're just, the reality is there is no perfect person. You'll always be able to find something that you don't like or that bothers you about a significant other, especially if you look for it. Right. So this idea of I need to be with the right one and then starting to nitpick your spouse, obviously you can understand that the strain that's going to put on the relationship, right? If you're nitpicking the fact that you don't like the way they dress, or you don't like their humor, you don't like their taste in movies, they have a different sports team than you, if you're doing that stuff, well, obviously that right there is going to cause strain on the relationship, right? And cause its own problems right there as well. So I just wanted to, eliminate that myth, the idea that, hey, look, like there is no right one, so to speak, right? I mean, you're always going to have something you can find. And really what it's about is, two people willing to be committed to a relationship and make it work and fight through the struggles that actually builds a relationship, right? That matures a relationship over the long run. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about is this idea of the word should, because this word gets brought up a lot when you're dealing with OCD in general, but especially with this, like, well, my partner should be this way, or this should happen, or they, all this stuff, right? And the thing is if we talk about the word should, what we need to realize is that the word should implies that how things are supposed to be, and because they're not that way, then there's something wrong. But the reality is that there really is no way something should be. There's just the way it is. Now, let me put a little caveat here on that, because obviously there are certain things that if a relationship's dangerous, if it's violence or abuse going on, of course, like that's not right, and you shouldn't be in those relationships. Okay, so let me just I want to just state that little asterisk there. But when we're talking about like, oh, my partner should be funny, or all these things, that you can always find something wrong, right? And so the idea with relationship OCD, when we're working on treating it, right, when we're working on someone with it, is to really, again, differentiate the idea that this isn't a relationship issue, it's an OCD issue. And when it's an OCD issue, we need to understand that what we're talking about is a malfunction of the emotional center of the brain, and that part of the brain doesn't operate in language, right? So when we're talking about working with OCD, the idea of trying to talk through that doesn't work, right? And that's why, psychoanalytic therapy doesn't work for OCD treatment and anxiety treatment, because we're not utilizing a part of the brain that even comprehends language. It's an emotional fear center, right, at the very, very center of the brain, that has a malfunction going on. And that's why when we sit with the anxiety, we sit with uncertainty, and we don't do the compulsions, and that's why treatment often is really just about compulsion elimination, right? So some common compulsions that people will do are things like analyzing their partner. They'll analyze their feelings, their arousal levels. They'll look for flaws. They'll kind of try to analyze other relationships, like, oh, see, they look happy, or this is right. And they'll do a lot of things in their head, which is why this kind of falls under that pure OCD, because this isn't your common thing where you'll see people washing their hands and stuff. A lot of the compulsions will be done right here. And so if you're working with someone, or if this is something that you struggle with, it's important to understand what the compulsions that the person's doing, what are the compulsions that the person's doing, and then systematically kind of removing them, sitting with uncertainty, learning to, look at the word love as a choice as opposed to a feeling. I mean, these are all things that, we would work on throughout the treatment process. And so hopefully, this kind of helps you understand what ROCD is, or relationship OCD, and how to start addressing it, and some key components on if you're working through this or if you're working with someone with it. And so again, thank you so much for tuning in this episode. We have some free resources available for you down in the notes, free assessments, free downloads over on our site, restoredminds.com. And so please check those out. Again, they're free for you. They're there to help you on your journey. And again, thank you so much for tuning in this week, and we'll be back as we continue this series on intrusive thoughts next week. So take care and hope you have a great day.